Hey everybody, it's Logan. So, haven't made some YouTube videos in a while, but I thought it was about time that I started to just catch everybody up on my lifestyle. And I think a large part of my following at this point knows that I grew up a Jehovah's Witness. And, it's been a little over 3.5 years since I've left when I turned 18. So, I'm not sure who all still watches my YouTube channel, but I thought I would catch everybody up on my thinking now. Sorry if my laptop fan gets loud. It's struggling. But my thinking now, how I've healed, how I've progressed, and where my mindset is at. So this is mostly unscripted. I have a list of bullet points of just a few things I thought I could talk about. And the first thing on my list um, I guess, is to give actually a rundown of why I left in the first place. So I was born as a Jehovah's Witness. I grew up in the religion. I was considered kind of a role model child. I was homeschooled my whole life, and I was an unbaptized publisher at 8 years old. Finally got baptized at 13 years old, just before my 13th birthday, actually. My parents flew us all from Tennessee to Hawaii for an international convention to make it this big event where I could get baptized in Hawaii. And it was a beautiful trip. It was a beautiful trip, but my motivations for getting baptized were not exactly legitimate, you could say. I convinced my parents that I wanted to get baptized because I wanted to make them happy, and I felt like it was the only path to happiness. They did not force me to get baptized, but they made it very clear that they felt that that was the best course of action. So naturally, I wanted to make my parents proud. I was an intelligent kid, and I did love God. And if that's what I had to do to show my love for God, I was going to do it. Um, but already at this time, I was dealing with addictions to pornography at age 12. Before that, even at age 10 or 11, I had just very early exposure. Um, and even before that, just had a very early puberty, very strong hormones as a kid at a very young age, even before exposure to that. So, um, just masturbation and pornography were a big problem for me growing up. And this just affected me deeply on an emotional level, on top of how my parents raised me. I just had a deep fear and insecurity complex, making myself feel like I would never be enough. And this is for many reasons, um, as well as that God couldn't love me, or that I was living a double life or a fake life because I had these addictions and these urges that I was not supposed to act on, but are in fact human. And while being so exemplary, I was later a regular pioneer at the age of 14. I just could not talk about these things. So, um, the reason that I eventually got myself kicked out was my mental health was starting to suffer as a teenager, um, mostly due to how strict my parents were and some things that they said to me as a teenager because they just didn't know how to raise one. I was an only child, and it was their first experience. Um, my parents were on the higher end of strict. My dad was disfellowshipped briefly, which I believe made him very insecure, and this was for the elders assumed that he assisted in fraud of a family member's business with no clear evidence, and he was disfellowshipped for over a year. And I remember him getting suicidal over this because many people had started rumors that he had also cheated on my mom. A although there wasn't any clear evidence, and I still don't know the whole story. They were terrified to even tell me the details. He refused to share because his ego was too big. So that's just some of my background. Um, as I turned into a teenager, I was homeschooling myself, doing high school online, started working part time in food service when I was 15, and just started to slowly gain freedom. I was intelligent. I got a car, my license at 16, and I'm working a full time job eventually, or around 30 hours a week, so part time, while also doing school and also pioneering. And I just didn't want to be at home. I greatly valued my freedom. I did anything I could to get out of the house. My parents scrutinized everything I did. I was not allowed to have devices in my room. I was not allowed to use the internet unsupervised. So I found as many ways as I could to be sneaky. Um, so, due to my addiction to my urges, I knew that I was beginning to view women as objects because that's how the internet was molding my mind. And I was desperately trying to make friends within my church, around me, within the Kingdom Hall, and also talk to girls or even just talk to women that were my mom's age, just so I could associate with females and not objectify them. Because my parents were so paranoid of me developing a relationship with any female that I was lectured one time for giving my best friend's mom a hug. So I had to rebel, and I did this out of my own sense of morality and my own logic, saying if I actually have a tangible relationship with a female or a friendship with a female, I will not continue down this path of seeing them as objects. And I didn't want to become that kind of person. And I prayed to God so much, so much, just poured my heart out all the time. Told him how much I wanted to be a good person and how much I did not want to have those urges and how I wanted to be useful and I wanted to have a meaningful life. Here I am, send me, kind of deal. And it's crazy, I'll share later. I basically never felt like my prayers were answered until I left home. I never felt a presence listening to my prayers until I left home, but I'm sure he was listening. It just took real struggle to really truly develop a relationship with God, but I'll get into that. So, I got on dating apps when I was 17. My dad was getting borderline emotionally abusive, had thrown me into walls, cabinets, and such, yelling at me that I didn't respect him because I hardly talked to him due to how egotistical he was acting. My dad tended to demand respect instead of earning it and justify it with the Bible, saying, I'm the head of the house, I deserve respect. You need to listen to me, you and your mom both. And I just thought it was all bullshit. I had a strong desire and love for justice, even as a kid. I had an understanding of it, and anything unjust would make my blood boil. And the way he acted at times, even though he wasn't necessarily violent for the most part, deeply disturbed me and did make me lose the majority of respect that I had for him, as much as I loved my dad. So at some point, between 16 and 17, I was trying to make friends with Jehovah's Witness girls. Just friendships, because they had a deeper level of emotional maturity than any male friends that I had did. I was able to talk about my problems with pornography and suicidal thoughts at this point with my female friends, and they were my only support network. So I was buying these $30, $40 Android burner phones from Walmart, just using them on Wi-Fi with a Snapchat account. trying to keep in touch with my friends uh, for my support network because I was in a very dark place emotionally. I felt like I could never live up to my parents' standards or all the standards and pressure that were put on me. So I needed support. I needed people to talk to that were my age, and that's what I had. But eventually, my parents kept fighting with me. Um, they did eventually discover I had a burner phone. My mom saw me throw it under a bed once, then snuck into my room, tricked me, pinned me against a wall, leapt under my bed, grabbed the phone, threatened to beat me if I didn't give her the passcode. I believe that's how it went down, or threatened to have my dad beat me. So I did, they read the conversations, and it's amazing the ignorance, because I would tell my parents that I was depressed or that I had some emotional issues that I wanted to talk about, and they would laugh at me, saying that, what could I ever be depressed about? You know, just stay optimistic. You're not sick and dying in a third world country. You have all of your limbs, which I respect that perspective, of course, but even if that is true, depression and emotional issues are still possible. But they didn't even want to believe that that was a possibility for their child, so they just laughed at it and let it go over their head, which just drove me further into hiding from them. So I began to act out as much as I could because overprotective parents just create sneaky children, sneaky teenagers. I learned how important it is to have just an open line of communication at all times and to be taken seriously. Because even though I was young, 15, 16, 17, I will never forget that people of that age are capable of deep, deep emotions and even suicidal thoughts, tendencies, or actions. And it, teenagers need to be taken seriously. Um, and the things I was dealing with then were very strong emotions. They weren't just wishy-washy, oh, you'll get over it, it's just a phase. It's nothing like that. It's actually very, very deep. It took me years of healing to get over those things. So they discovered my burn phones, and things escalated to where my dad was starting fights with me. I couldn't talk to my friends, and I ran away for a while when I was 17, 3 or 4 days. I remember my mom was weeping because I had left in a hurry. And yeah, they finally allowed me to have a phone that they wouldn't touch. And this is when I reconnected with my friends and also decided to start dating someone who was not a Jehovah's Witness because I just deeply, deeply, deeply longed for some sort of intimate or close relationship of some kind because all of the friends I had were extremely shallow, emotionally immature, and most of my friends were in their 20s when I was a teenager and they could understand what I was going through. But I couldn't talk to them about deeper issues. I was too scared because I had such a good reputation and I was living under so much scrutiny and pressure. So eventually I did start a relationship with another 17-year-old girl who I met on Tinder, and liked her very, very much. We're crazy teenagers. We snuck out all the time. I'll drive an hour to the city to meet her. And I strongly care for her. You know, I wasn't in love with her or anything, but I didn't want to have to keep it a secret. And also, things were escalating with my parents to the point where I just did not want them on my back anymore. Because after giving me a phone, they were then even more paranoid, scrutinizing everything I did. I lost my virginity and I lost many privileges in the congregation, and I was no longer a pioneer. So that hit them like a train of bricks. They were weeping for a good solid week that I did that behind their back. And after that, I just so badly wanted a relationship. Now, this was 2 months before I turned 18 that I went for this, and I had a very good connection with this girl. But the moral of the story is I basically got myself kicked out on purpose because my mental health was still declining, being around my parents and from all of the disappointment and pressure. And I just felt like there was no way out. I was still suicidal, and my friendships and my relationship with this girl were the only thing that gave me any sort of peace. So I felt like I needed that. And my dad was getting a little scary. I just could not figure out a way to have a relationship with them at that time or explain to them what I was going through. Maybe it began to get through their heads as I began to stray, but at that point I was too far gone, had no trusts, had no open communication. My dad said a few very harsh things that drove me away finally. He said that how I was acting by hiding these things from them made him lose respect for me enough that he would never treat me like an adult, even if I were 18, 21. He would always try to control my life and never respect me as an adult if I just continued treating him that way disrespectfully. Which sounds so incredibly egotistical and narcissistic now. My parents treated me like property. They told me that I owed them respect because they put me here. Kind of like a parent saying, I put you here and I can take you out, or I brought this into this world and I can take you out. That was their mentality. They deserved some sort of worship or extreme respect and deserved a level of control over my life, even if I were an adult, because they raised me. They assumed possession over my life. And maybe not to an extreme extent, but to an extent enough that I knew it was wrong. So I rebelled. Another thing my dad said is that he regretted raising me, and he later corrected that to that he regretted the way that he raised me. But the words "I regret raising you" really stuck with me, and after having such low self-esteem already, to the point where I felt like this world would be way better off without me. God would stop getting disappointed. My parents would stop getting disappointed. That really drove a nail into my heart. So at that point, I gave up. I was completely emotionally numb. I was able to tell my parents exactly what I was doing with a blank look on my face while they wept. And this is a lot to go through at a young age. Eventually, I came clean to the elders. I told them that I was in a relationship with someone outside of the church because I just wanted out. I wanted to be left alone. I wanted to be independent so that I could figure out who I was without anyone telling me who I was. And I think that is also very important for anyone who grows up as a human in this life, right? We all need to figure out why we enjoy life, what we enjoy about life. What are your personal morals? What do you find meaningful? Because if you don't have your own strong convictions and someone else just puts them all there for you, you will feel completely empty inside. I can tell you from firsthand. So I just turned 18, within a week or two after turning 18, right around January 1st of 20, 2020, I believe. I left home, and COVID hit shortly after, and I survived doing DoorDash, Uber Eats, any hustles that I could. I had a few different jobs. The girl that I was dating broke up with me 2 weeks after I was disfellowshipped because another ex Jehovah's Witness friend tricked me into taking a large dose of drugs. Even when she told me not to, I gave in to peer pressure. So that scared her very bad. She broke up with me, and I later attempted to jump off a cliff. Um, so I went to jump off this cliff because I had just given up. I felt like I had given up my entire life for one person who then betrayed me 2 weeks after. And I climbed over the fence and I fell, and I was basically caught by my leather jacket. I had an obsession with leather jackets at the time. I still love them. Um, and I crawled back up. My dad did call me, and my girlfriend, who had just broken up with me, I had told her I was leaving. I said goodbye, and she called my parents. They called me after my attempt and told me that life was worth living. I don't remember the entire conversation. I was a little too distraught. And then I continued on with my life. So the next year and a half were spent in a very toxic marriage. I actually got married, which is a whole nother story, but I think that's enough background for how I got disfellowshipped, why I got disfellowshipped, what I was going through at the time. And this began the start of me finding myself as a person, because my whole life I had lived for others and for others' approval, for God's approval, while I struggled with my own desires and was told that anything and everything I wanted was selfish. Um, so I had to take the plunge. I went out of the frying pan into the fire, survived on my own, and I learned a lot of lessons. So I still believed that that was the truth for at least a year or two. But as I began living through life, reconnecting with God, also going off the deep end and trying some much more evil things, seeing evil firsthand, I learned a lot about the world, and I learned a lot about God, and I learned a little more of, you could say, the truth about life. And I'm still very young, but the experiences that I had brought me much closer to God than ever. I could say, and I get goosebumps, that I have a real relationship with God now after the struggle that I endured. And I believe that he never let me fall fully. He never let me die, no matter how close to death I got. And that goes into my first bullet point, my near-death experience, my first one. So, after leaving home, I decided, because I was a bit of a mad scientist in my mind, I decided to go headfirst into witchcraft to see if spirits were real at all from a scientific perspective. Now, this was the biggest mistake, but also the biggest lesson of my life. I drew every sigil in the book. I bought a Ouija board. I did blood rituals. I did it all just to invoke as much as I could and see what would happen. And I saw the most terrifying things that I might ever see in my life. And I will never forget them. Demons are very real, or malevolent entities are very real. And they have a physical influence over this world. And that in itself is an entire other story. Maybe I'll make a part about sharing my story with those experiences, but so within several months after leaving home, 4 or 5 months, I was struggling with these things that I had angered, keeping me up for most of the night, waking me up out of my sleep, giving me nightmares, dragging me around the room physically, waking me up out of my sleep, scaring me repeatedly until I could hardly sleep. So I became very addicted to nicotine, juuling, and Bang energy drinks while I was surviving trying to work a job at Amazon to get by. And I had a 1 hour commute from my home in Hood River to Portland, Oregon at Amazon. And after a couple months working at Amazon, stacking boxes in trucks, I was on my way home on this long, one way straight highway. That was my commute. And this was my near death experience. I finally finished my Jewel Pod and finished my energy drink because I was so exhausted. I was just trying to make it home. And that day, and for a couple days before that, I had smoked an entire Jewel Pod per day. So a pack of cigarettes worth of nicotine, and I'm 18 years old, 120 pounds. So I finished my Jewel Pod, one pack of nicotine in that day, one pack of cigarettes worth, and my third energy drink I also finished. And suddenly I begin feeling paralyzed. My heart's racing, and then it begins to flutter quite a bit. And all of a sudden, I'm holding the steering wheel, and my body turns into lead. Like I can no longer move at all, and I'm just watching from behind my eyes, looking through as if I'm completely just motionless, paralyzed in my body. And I'm on the highway, mind you, in the left lane. One lane next to me is a 2 lane highway, and I was in the process of passing a semi, and all of a sudden I cannot move. So my foot's on the pedal, my arms are up on the steering wheel, and I cannot move. So I'm sitting here, completely paralyzed and terrified. I can't move, and I start to panic mentally. And then, in a flash, and this will sound a little strange, all of a sudden I was ejected from my body. Well, first, I was sitting there paralyzed, and I felt as if I were lifting out of my seat. A very strange feeling, kind of like being in a plane when it descends very quickly. I felt like I was floating upwards, but visually I was still in my car. But it felt like there was a magnet above me just pulling me up very strongly, like I had become weightless. I was just going up like this. And all of a sudden, I blinked, or there was a flash, and suddenly it's as if, from my perspective, I am looking down at my car from 30 feet above in the air, as if I had begun floating above my car. I'm watching from the sky, and I can see through the roof of my Toyota. I'm seeing the trees go by, I'm seeing my car here and the semi here, and I'm seeing them both driving down the highway. And I'm watching from above, and I was shocked, and I'm watching. I can see through the roof of my car, and I see my own body in the car, motionless. And my car starts to veer towards the semi because no one's controlling it. So I start to panic, and I'm just like, no, 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 no. And suddenly I'm like trying to tell my body as if I were sending a signal down to an RC car, move left, move left, move left, just move out of the way, move out of the way, you gotta get off the highway. And then there's a flash again, and I'm back in the driver's seat, and I'm just holding on to the wheel, and my body still feels like lead. I'm still just sitting there, and I'm like, it took all of the effort in my body. It felt like it was the heaviest wheel in the world, but I managed to just turn the wheel to the right while also tapping the brake ever so slightly. I just scooted my foot to the left to land on the brake. And by doing this, I was next to the semi, I slowed down, got behind it, and then took an exit off of the highway. Now, this exit is on I-84 between Portland and Hood River. It's known as Angel's Crossing, was the name of this exit, and I found that out later. But I managed to come to a stop. I briefly had enough strength to stop my car and put it in park. And then I'm sitting there again, and my heart is pounding, fluttering. It would stop for a few seconds and start up and flutter, just completely irregular. And I'm struggling to breathe, can barely move. And eventually I'm just sitting here and like, okay, I need to get out of the car, is what I'm thinking. So I lift up my hand, it takes all of my strength, and I'm just like, I set it on the door handle. I'm able to pull the door handle, and I fell out completely limp out of my seat, just fell out of the car. At that point, I was completely paralyzed again, and I'm laying. I had just fallen out of the car completely, so my back was on the ground, my legs were up in the driver's seat, and I'm just laying upside down, looking into the trees. And my heart was pounding and fluttering, and all of a sudden, just stopped, just flatlined. It just stopped. Craziest feeling, to feel your heart stop. Next, I tried to take a breath, and couldn't breathe either. I sent the signal, it's like I was sending the signal from my brain down. Nothing. So I'm laying there completely motionless, heart has stopped, I can't breathe. And then all of a sudden there's a flash again, and immediately I'm standing above my body, separate from my body, looking into the trees. And I see my corpse at my feet, even though I have no body. I feel like a spirit form. And I look up, and there is an angel. It's the only way I can describe it. It was a being made of hundreds of eyes. Hundreds. Any one of those eyes that I looked at, it felt as if it were sentient, responding to me. Each single one of those eyes looked like an entity by itself, but it was this vaguely humanoid shaped green and yellow being, all made up completely of eyes. And I hear telepathically, you are more protected than you know. You're not done. Going back, essentially, were the concepts it was sharing with me. So, while in this state, I also briefly felt, while this thing was talking to me, as if I had been alive for thousands of years, as if I could go anywhere in time and space. And the best way I can describe this is, if you were playing a video game or watching a movie for hours and hours, and you get up, sometimes there's this feeling of like, oh yeah, this is real life. Wow, I was just sitting there for so long. It was this strange detachment, like I took a pair of VR goggles off and was woken up back to the real world. That's what it felt like. It felt like my human life was a short video game, and that I was back to my real self. And that maybe I had just gone there as a bit of a challenge or a bit of an experience. So it told me these things. All of a sudden, in a flash again, not an actual flash, just instant transition, I woke up in my body, laying away from my car. The car was shut off, ready to go. I woke up laying on the ground, and I got up and I just started weeping and called my friends to pick me up. because I couldn't believe what had just happened. So that experience will always stay with me. I was not doing drugs at this time. I was sober besides these stimulants. I will never forget that memory. And whether it was a delusion or not, it felt so real. And I have never experienced anything of that magnitude ever again, and I never have before. I'm sorry for yawning so much. So, that near death experience to me caused me to believe that I have a soul. Now, Jehovah's Witnesses teach that we do not have a soul, and that when we die, it simply lights out until God decides to resurrect you. But when that experience happened, I disconnected from my body. I left, and I was something else that had a lot more memories, a lot more experience, and a lot more abilities than I do while I'm here. I don't know if everybody has a soul. I'm not sure that everyone does. But whatever that was, it felt like me. It felt like my higher self. It really feels now like I am 1% of the person here. I'm 1% of whatever that being was while I'm a person here. The other 99% is in spirit form. So I believe I have a soul now, and that is one of the first things that caused me to question the beliefs that I was given and taught growing up. I'll move on because I don't want to make this a 2-hour video. Now, again, I didn't script this, I didn't do much research, but I just wrote down some random points. The next point that I had was simply attitudes of the JWs that I observed. Now, having been in the world, in real society for a few years now, comparing regular people that I meet to witnesses that I grew up with, I notice a lot of behavioral problems in the Jehovah's Witnesses. They're clear for me to see now that I couldn't really see while growing up in it. Now, some traits that I can list off that they're very good at, and that the majority of witnesses have, are love bombing, altruism, so only doing things for each other within their cult, nobody else, narcissism, people pleasing, ego, but it's a very strange form of ego that is more tied to self-righteousness, prejudice against anyone who's not a witness or is an outsider. Really, they just, as I've begun to research all of the traits that make up a cult, which I've made a video on this before about a year ago, they lined up perfectly. Like when I really honestly talk to myself about it, witnesses display every single trait of a cult, all 7, I think it is. And also, the female friends that I had while being a teenager were some of the most bitchy, ignorant, selfish, mocking, gossiping, rude people that I've ever met who would start drama over the smallest thing, attack people. They're insecure. I knew plenty of teenage girls after leaving, and they were just above and beyond. They were some of the worst, most insecure, unhappy females that I'd ever met. And then a lot of the men my age and under were very nonchalant and kind of shallow. They had a deep love of God and of life, but kind of just tried to play hard and often just had their own issues in different sorts of ways. It's hard to explain. Everybody does, but for a religion that seems to be so focused on self-improvement and being close to God, a lot of people just hid their issues or hid their sins or hid their problems, or stuck to themselves, or had strange self-righteousness and prejudice and narcissism that was just twisted in this way of being Christian. And it's fascinating. Like, now that I've been away for long enough, Jehovah's Witnesses and Christians are some of the weirdest, most twisted, manipulative, emotionally abusive people that I've known because of their love bombing, altruistic tendencies, the way they go after people who already have trauma in their life. Um, they often just prey on the weak. You know, if you find people who are already suffering, and this is just common for any sort of abuse, if you find people who are already suffering from some sort of loss, they are more, what's the word, malleable, impressionable. They're easier to groom. So this whole religion to me now seems to be based more off of fear and loss than anything else. Because if you were to leave and to truly question your beliefs and maybe you get kicked out for it, you lose everything. You lose your entire support structure. You lose it all. And for me personally, I know how much better I would have done in life, how much further ahead I would be, how many fewer mistakes I would have made by now if I had support. I navigated this world completely alone. I'm really feeling God's presence right now because thankfully I wasn't completely alone. I built a stronger relationship with the Creator than I ever had growing up my whole life. He was my true father, but no, it's just evil to have somebody who's struggling to kick them to the curb. This is essentially what disfellowshipping is. Disfellowshipping itself is one reason why I can't trust that religion. Sure, you don't want to associate with people who are doing bad things, but a lot of people who are disfellowshipped are repentant or wouldn't do the same things again, or they just simply don't have a good understanding. I've met disfellowship people who simply didn't go out preaching because they were 16 and they didn't have a good understanding yet. They weren't sure if they wanted to preach, but they got baptized and were disfellowshipped for it. And the depression and the consequences of that were so bad that they turned into alcoholics. Disfellowshipping causes suicide. I believe a quarter or even half of all disfellowshipped people attempt suicide. I did, and many of them are successful. The psychological warfare of losing everybody you ever knew, your whole family, and having them all outcast you is one of the most evil things I've experienced. And that is no harsh love. It is a very terrible thing. And justice, even if it were just, justice is miscarried. Sadly, even if that is a just provision, even if it's only meant for extreme circumstances, which it's not, it gets miscarried often, which causes loss of life, extreme distress, people ruining their lives essentially and losing everybody who cared about them. And it's just fascinating. So, another thing I noticed with Jehovah's Witnesses is hypocrisy in their own teachings. There are Watchtower articles from the 1900s sharing that disfellowshipping is a pagan practice, and later they adopt it into their own religion. It's just disgusting. Okay, my next bullet point, and these are all just mentalities that I have developed as I learn and grow. My next bullet point is doubt that there is one religion. Reminded of the Gentiles. So, witnesses are so sure that they are the only chosen religion, the only chosen group, and that they will be the biggest religion to walk through Armageddon. And I think that is foolish. Now, as much as God may choose people and love humans and want humans to carry out his will, to believe that there is only one chosen people, I think, is extremely foolish, self-righteous, egotistical, etc. The Bible does say to meet with others who share your values and beliefs, but nowhere does it say that Jehovah will have, or that the Creator will have a chosen group. The whole point of Jesus opening up worship from just the Jews to the Gentiles and all people is that there would no longer be a favorite, there would no longer be a chosen sect or group, not just culture, but not a chosen congregation, not ever. Now, sure, there would be congregations, but not only one chosen select group. And witnesses now try to make themselves feel better by saying, oh, those with the right heart condition will still make it through. But to choose yourselves and say, we are the chosen ones, we're the only ones, everybody else is going to die, except for maybe God will spare a few. I find that disgusting as well. Because the reality is, and I've done my deep legal and serious research, not into apostate things, but into deep operations of how Jehovah's Witnesses operate. They operate as a for-profit organization. They have many corrupt dealings. They have a lot of terrible legal proceedings. While being on the inside, they tend to brag about how many court cases they win and how well they do. In reality, they lose so many of their court cases. They're hemorrhaging tens of millions of dollars of people's donations because of refusal to cooperate with the law. I've found leaked governing body meetings of governing body members saying that they feel as if Satan is attacking them legally. You can find clips of this on the internet. They feel as though now in the last days Satan is attacking them legally, and that they're going to delete every record that they come across of any serious crimes that were covered up. This is another topic, but Jehovah's Witnesses, the higher up the pyramid you go, basically, because every organization is a pyramid, the more secretive things get. And that's just in general for most organizations and secret societies. So in the higher tiers, starting with the elders, any reports of child abuse or crime or severe misconduct or illegal actions are often dismissed by the elders, especially if someone is of a high enough rank, like an elder. They don't take legal action, and this is just swept under the rug. Now, they have tried to defend themselves. They've even made a brochure saying that they report everything to the law, but this is not the case. They're not required to report anything to the law. And the system of records that they have from their own governing body meeting, the records get deleted. They get reviewed and deleted. And it's so secretive and hypocritical. Just, I think they lost one court case where they had to pay $35 million in settlement because they refused to hand over a database of names that they had of all known child abusers within their congregations in Australia. And they had this information, refused to hand it over, and just paid the fine. And that just makes my blood boil. You say one thing and you do another. You say you're going to cooperate with the law, and you don't. You say you win most of the court cases, and you don't. You're bleeding money from innocent people who are giving it to you. It's disgusting. And then they promote their humanitarian efforts when all they do is maybe build a couple homes for strangers, and most of them just take care of their own members. And the cheapest countries possible, usually. All organizations are corrupt. This is something that I've learned. And to trust any organized religion in this day and age is terrifying. And there is a scripture that I cannot remember by heart right now, but it basically says that in the last days, the words of the Bible, the truth, will be twisted and corrupted to the point where you should not trust any man. And this seems to have been the case. Now, I personally believe at this point, due to the relationship that I've built with God on my own, that you should not have a middleman. You should not have a middleman between yourself and your Father. To have a group to support you or lead you in the right direction, that's nice, sure, but I personally was kind of God's fan growing up. And this is another point I want to make, is many religions are just God fan clubs. They're going to cheer about God, they're going to tell everybody about God, they're going to say how great God is, but to Jesus or to God, they're just a fan. They'll tell everybody about God, they'll say how great He is, they'll read about Him, they'll act out against bad, sinful things, but do they have a relationship with God? Usually a very shallow one, quite often, if any, because I did. My relationship with God was nothing compared to what it is now. And I asked Him to help me make a very direct video today. And it took the extreme struggle of me being out on my own for me to draw close to Him. Because just being a fan of God, telling people about Him, acting, trying to be a good person, was in no way putting myself on the front lines where He needed me. By being inside of an altruistic cult, you are not able to truly take as much action in other people's lives as you could if you were not inside of a cult. Because as a Jehovah's Witness, you are told to not be friends with anybody unless you're teaching them to be a witness. Because they're outsiders. Don't get to know them on a deeper personal level. No. And here's the thing, how are you going to help people if you don't know them on a deeper personal level? They're not going to trust you with what's really going on in their lives. You're going to miss out on 99% of people's problems because you are stuck inside of your fan club and you don't get close to these people. How are you going to know them on a close personal level? You can't. And so many of these fan clubs, they're cheering on about God, they're talking about Him, but it's all yip yap. I believe when I told God how devoted I was, when I did devote myself to God as a kid, He didn't want me stuck in a cult. Because on my own, I can speak out, I can get involved with people's lives in close and meaningful ways, I can affect others well, and I don't have to live within the confines of don't talk to about this, don't talk to this person, only talk to these set of people under this branch, under this label of Jehovah's Witness, this is all you are. No, I've developed a relationship with God on my own. I'm not prejudiced. I don't think that everybody's going to die except for my people. So I am able to connect with people in a meaningful way and share how God has helped me and stick to my own standards without being prejudiced. And as much as they tell you to treat every man with respect because we're all created by God, there is still a level of prejudice because every worldly person is an outsider. And I've witnessed countless witnesses have so much prejudice for outsiders. So the idea of being in a fan club and that there's one religion, I think is disgusting. I think God can choose anybody, anyone with the right heart. And they do not have to be in a certain group. They do not have to be led to that group. You should not assume that you have the perfect group. There was a clip of one governing body member, Anthony Morris, at a Supreme Court hearing, or some sort of court hearing, and they asked Anthony Morris, does your group, the governing body, believe that you are the spokespeople of God? So I thought about that. I'm like, well, at the bottom, as Jehovah's Witnesses, we believe the governing body are anointed, they run this religion, and they pray to God for direction. They're at the top, they're making all the decisions. Of course, they would feel like spokesmen for God because they believe they have the one true religion, and everything else under them is ran under their direction, and they have some sort of special spiritual. They're the chosen ones. They have some sort of more direct connection in order to have that privilege. You know what he said? He said, no, we're not the spokesman of God. We just consider ourselves a faithful slave, trying to do our best. I forget the exact wording. But no, we're not the spokesman of God. That scares me too. Because as a prophet, like Paul or Moses or anyone, of course they would say that they're the spokesman of God in the past, in the Bible. So who's the spokesman today? Well, it's not the people running Jehovah's Witnesses. They actually deny that. And don't get me started on how I've seen Freemason rings on their pinkies during broadcasts, which is another thing you can look up. I've studied each of the governing body members' lives and the history of their lives, as well as the connections they have, and the money that they have, and the mansions that they own, and their habits, and their drinking, and their cigar smoking. It says a lot. And we don't hear about this. You have to do your own research to know about this. And it is a sin not to question your faith, not to keep testing your faith, not to have strong conviction of your faith. If you simply do what you are told, you're an NPC. You're an agent of the world. You're a good slave. And religions have been used throughout history to manipulate people into being more compliant and also to divide and conquer the masses, make people disagree about ethical small matters so that no one sees the bigger picture. And if you simply do as you're told, you don't do your own research, you trust the government, trust the religion, you're a slave. You are mentally, emotionally a slave. You're letting them feed on your fear of death, your fear of losing your loved ones, to allow you to just stick to their doctrine do what you're told. And in no way is that the kind of person that God wants. You don't just do what you're told by men. You listen to God. God's direction is most important, and if you don't have a close relationship with Him, and if you're listening to men before God, something is wrong. And you're not getting the truth. You're not getting the correct message, because the thing is, being raised a witness, we talked about miracles in the Bible, sure, but nobody talked about how they could come true today. We didn't really think that was possible. But miracles still do happen today. And also terrible things still happen today. We didn't think that possession was possible among the witnesses that I knew. I've seen possession firsthand in other people. Everything in the Bible practically is still possible today. But you're not going to experience that when you're in a fan club, because you're not on the front lines of reality. You're in a fan club. And you are sheltered, in a sense. Yip-yapping about how great God is, but you're not truly on the front lines. God needs people who take action. Not just letting your faith be monetized to grow a profitable organization. This is what these people do. Your faith is being monetized and used and pushed to add money to a growing organization that invests in worldly stocks, including Hollywood and companies that they advise against following, even index funds that include tobacco. A watchtower invests people's money in stocks and real estate. and then they sell their own churches to other religions for extreme profit across the world. And these are just facts. I'm not pulling out a Bible, I'm not questioning biblical beliefs. I'm looking at the actual actions of this organization because I want to know that the head of this organization is making decisions that make sense. Are these decisions that probably someone on the bottom, a regular witness, would make if they were trying to please God? And honestly, no, a lot of them are very scary decisions, very questionable, very unethical, very secretive, very worrying. And this just worries me because, and I'm not just trying to pick out the bad fruit and the few bad things. It's the whole thing as a whole. There's just too many broken parts. There's too much corruption here, and here. Cover up here, secrecy here, tax evasion, corrupt businessman. There's a lot of corrupt, well-known, unethical people who help handle financial matters and other legal matters for this. When Jehovah's Witnesses become a legal entity, a monetary entity, and a business entity, and the connection from fantasy religion to real world connections, in that line where they connect, there are a lot of unethical practices, terrible businessmen. George Soros handles finances. He is well known as an extremely corrupt man who enjoys investing in things that tear down governments and stability of the world. And it just doesn't line up. The tours given at Bethel are competing companies that are for profit, and they have a lot of regular worldly people who are looking for profit, and they compete against each other for the best returns. And life inside Bethel, the house of God, is getting worse and worse. Drugs, orgies. It's bad. It's really bad as a whole. And it makes this religion just look more and more cultish. It makes it look just as bad as any other religion, but with the most optimistic people inside saying that it's not. I've found more issues with Jehovah's Witnesses than I've found with other religions. It's just sad, because I would love to believe that it's the best one. And so far, they're all extremely corrupt, but they're comfortable bubbles for people. These religions are comfortable bubbles of ignorance. And you don't have to take as much action if you're a Jehovah's Witness as actually being out in the world and fighting for truth. You don't have to take as much action. Sure, it's hard, it's difficult. It's not as difficult as being a man of God in the world full of darkness. That safety bubble is not as good, or not as difficult. Being on your own, being a soldier for God on the front lines is what's most difficult. So I guess some more bullet points I have here. Oh, well, truth is more complicated than fiction. That is one. There's many issues with the New World Translation. There's a lot of added words, a lot of twisted and changed words, and people just want to trust that this was made by scholars who just know better, and they know the English language best, and they're going to make it as accurate as possible. No. I studied Hebrew a little bit, and I found enough inconsistencies and added words and things that were changed in the most recent New World Translation to immediately see clearly that something's wrong there. But you want to believe when you hear from the governing body that it's the best Bible yet. But how do you prove that? As a man of God, you need to prove these things to yourself. Or else you're simply listening to men and you're putting men above God. Truth is far more strange than fiction. Now, I've also had experiences with UFOs, multi-dimensional entities. I believe aliens may be real. I try to keep an open mind because my whole life I grew up with closed-minded people who were so sure of themselves that they knew it all and that was the truth and there's nothing else. But as soon as I began to explore the world, I realized that there's a far deeper situation going on. There's much more depth to this entire world and universe than you could ever imagine unless you stay in your fan club. And I've had crazy experiences that I don't have time to go into this evening. But there is far more going on than what is outlined in the Bible. Far more going on. Being on the front lines for God. That's something I mentioned somewhat, but yes, I believe that if you truly want to show God how much you love Him, and that you are a person of God, a man of God, a woman of God, you want to be in the world, acting as a man of God, closer to real people in their lives, so you can really make a difference. Because when you're in your fan club, it's too easy to be prejudiced and secluded among your group of people and then only get close to people just to tell them about your group, your fan club, but not to actually care about them deeply as a person and introduce them to God and be their friend, which is what most people need. It's very shallow. Witnessing, preaching, it's very shallow. The relationships that you're taught to build with real people are very shallow and one-sided, and they're only for one reason. Otherwise, you're not even supposed to be friends with them. It's conditional. It's extremely conditional, and that is not loving. My own experiences was another bullet point, but I think I've gone into enough for now. And not wanting to be in the fan club was my last bullet point. So this was my rant today on the feelings that I've developed, the mindsets that I've developed about religion currently. I'm happy to say that despite all of my worst experiences, which I have chosen not to share today, I have drawn far closer to God, and I feel as though He will be able to make use of me to spread a good message. And sometimes I get approached by priests or Christians or random people who are God-fearing in public, and they tell me, I had one man tell me, you know, you're very kind. You're going to lift a lot of people up. You're anointed to do something. I see it in your eyes. And another Christian used the word anointed, and they said that I was anointed to do something. And, you know, my self-esteem isn't the best. After being given a second chance at life, I'm grateful for every day that I get here. And, of course, I want to spread truth, and I have a strong love for truth. And I want people to know that God is real and that there is a Creator who loves us, and that death is not the end. And I don't know all the details yet, but I know what I've experienced firsthand, and there's a wonderful message, but I just don't trust organizations for good reasons that I try to share here. But whoever you may be, I'm not sure how much of this video you watched. I don't know if you're currently a Jehovah's Witness or questioning or just researching religions or looking into this one, but God is very real. He loves us all. He wants us to succeed. He wants us to live as happily as possible. And I think we all have purpose, and we can be given purpose. And having purpose is very important while we're here, isn't it? So, never stop searching for truth, my friend. And that's all I'll share today. Take care.